Our video today is presented by BetUS. Richie, Florida State got some big news this week with Daryl Jackson announcing that he was going to come back and not go to the NFL. I've got some thoughts. I've got some questions I want to talk about this, but before we get into those, I do think that that's a pretty good pickup. Like, if last year hadn't happened, he fits what you want to do with three defensive linemen. Big kid, can certainly play the nose. There are certainly questions that we'll have about it, but just immediate thoughts on Jackson coming back and foregoing the NFL for one more year.
If you were to get him in the transfer portal, that would be considered a massive get. And obviously, we got him in the portal last year, so that happened. But the fact that he is coming back, I think that is a huge deal. You know, you have a new defensive coordinator coming in. Odell has stepped down, and you'll have a new defensive line coach. And I think that this is a really big deal because I think that, all right, Daryl Jackson is an NFL body. Like, there is no doubt about that whatsoever. Like, he is an NFL body, and he's someone who NFL scouts are glamoring over. They're like, I want this guy. I just need to see more film from him. And he has the chance to do that this year. And if the defense is better, the scheme is better, and he's able to just play his game and not try to play for himself, I think that's a huge benefit for Florida State and what we have coming back this year. I am so happy he's coming back. You know, was a little frustrating because obviously, you know, there's all the negotiations between NIL and whatnot and what goes on. And that can be frustrating for any fan or certainly any coach. But yeah, I think him coming back is a really big deal for Florida State.
So he did have a pretty tough start, and a lot of fans whined and moaned and complained about the way that he started the year. He definitely got better as the year went on. And I know people will remember the Lagway play where he didn't make the sack. I've rewatched that a couple of times after he said he was coming back, and I kind of think he thought he had him in the grasp and they were going to blow it dead. Not that you should give up on a play or anything like that. Also, Lagway did that like 4 times to other, SEC defensive linemen too.
Lagway's just a good player. Like,
yeah, he's just kind of a physical freak. But he did certainly improve as the year went on. I think the biggest question to me is not necessarily whether or not the talent's there. It's more so the mental side of things, maybe the culture side of things too, are the big questions. Like, can he really have that motor of, I'm going to go in and I'm going to dominate? Because Farmer definitely, and we'll talk about Josh here in a minute, but Farmer definitely showed that at times, like where he was just like, dude, I'm just going to wreck things. And Farmer, I think, had a really good year, and I think he'll get drafted high. But high-ish, right? I don't think he's a top 2-round guy, but I think he improved very much through the year. It's just kind of the question of, hey, you kind of had some questions when he was tweeting things like, hey, if that guy goes, I'm going with him, or thinking about going back to Miami, this, that, and the other, all these things that went on. And so to me, it's not really an ability thing. I'm excited that Odell's still there, but I'm also excited that Knighton's there. And so he kind of has like a double dose of coaching at this point. And if he's focused, I think he will have a really good year. It's more of the question of like, man, if things do start tough, if he doesn't have the start to the year that he wants, like, are we kind of back in the same position? Is he going to approach this like, hey man, I'm playing for that NFL paycheck, right? I think Josh Farmer this year, I don't know if he was necessarily playing for FSU. I'm not saying he wasn't. I think he was playing because he wanted to go get paid. And I think that's going to benefit him a ton. He is going to go get paid. I will get right back to chatting with Richie, but first, I want to give some love to our friends over at BetUS. Make sure that you're betting with BetUS using our code YouTube150. That gets you a 150% deposit bonus on your first deposit, 125% on your next two, all of that up to $2,000. If you're betting on the postseason, if you're betting on the NFL, if you're betting on bowls, make sure that you're betting with BetUS using our code YouTube150. Can Jackson have that same mentality? And obviously you want guys to go play for the logo and play for your school and play for the colors. I get all that. I don't know how realistic that is in today's football. I don't really care what their motivations are. I just want him to have it this year. And so if he has it, it's going to be great for FSU. If he doesn't, if some of the other stuff kind of creeps in, maybe it doesn't work out super well. But at the same time, I think Mike Norvell has to take some risks, take some calculated gambles. Like, the defensive line needs a lot of help, and Jackson can come help if he's in the right frame of mind and if he's doing things the right way. And so to me, like, it's a risk worth taking.
Yeah, no, again, he is a NFL body. Like, he is ready. you know, he could start in the NFL tomorrow, or even for the Bucks tonight. Even though the Bucks have a great defensive line, so I'll pull back on that a little bit. But he has the frame to be an NFL player today if he can fine tune some things and he can truly buy into a scheme and a defensive coordinator who is trying to show him what is expected. And I think there's a good chance by him coming back that there's a chance that happens, and I'm excited to have him back. Worst case, okay, he ends up being a backup. I don't think that's the case. I think he will definitely be a starter all year. But say he does end up being a backup, that's a freaking great backup to have on your roster.
Yeah, I think they'll. Yeah, it's really. I mean, there are certainly risks with when you take any player or bring any player back. However, I think again Mike needs to take risks and
Yeah,
needs to kind of
he has
turn
no
this thing around.
choice.
And so this is kind of a calculated risk. I do think that a couple other guys moving off the defensive line are going to help him. And we'll see. Year 3 in the system, right? He had to sit out a year because the NCAA is a bunch of crooks. And then obviously last year, his first year playing an entire year. And then we'll see what year 3 looks like. People have tossed this idea around. I don't know if there's any legs to it or not. I'm not saying there's any legs to it. I've certainly not heard anything about this. So let me preface the whole question here, Richie, before people start running to everywhere else. Do you think there's any chance that Farmer does the same thing? Like for some reason, there's like smoke around that. There's talk or chatter around that. Do you think that that's possible?
No, I just don't see him coming back. I think, last year, obviously we were very excited to have him back. I thought he played really well this year. Like I have nothing bad to say about him, but I think there's still some sour taste in people's mouths about the negotiations that eventually brought him back to Florida State. I don't think they're looking to play that game again. I wouldn't mind if they did. I think he's a phenomenal player, and I would love to have him back at Florida State again. But personally, and again, this is with no inside information. I do not expect him back. I don't know about you, TJ.
Yeah, I'd lean no. I think, if I could have picked between the two, no offense to Jackson at all, like I think Farmer's the better player. I
Yeah,
also think that Farmer would hit your NIL pretty hard, right? Like he's probably what do you think he goes? Round 3, 4? So he's probably going to need more money this year to stay than he got last year.
probably
And
looking at 750 grand, probably.
yeah, like that's a lot of money,
Yeah,
and I think Florida State needs to, they're not gearing up for a run, right? Like
no,
at the playoffs or anything. Would Farmer help you? Yes, but I also think your expectations are a little bit different, and you probably need to invest in some other places. If Jackson wasn't coming back and you wanted to make a push at like that'd be kind of the situation. I don't know that you can. I mean, you could afford it. Somewhere else would have to kind of suffer, right? Like you'd have to take money from elsewhere to do that. What are your thoughts on this? Pat Payton lands at LSU, something that is maybe a little bit surprising. Obviously, Pat didn't have the year that you would have wanted him to have this year. LSU picks up their second former Seminole with Destin Hill going there too. But thoughts on Pat Payton landing over there?
yeah. I thought Pat Payton was going to have a phenomenal year this year. Obviously he got all sorts of accolades the previous year in 2023, and would have loved to have him back at Florida State this year. I'm not going to pretend it's not a loss. It definitely is a big loss, but he did not produce the way that we had hoped he would this year. But I thought he would have potentially be first, second, or third team All American this year. Did not happen. But LSU, they seem to be all in, right? We were just talking about how Florida State. There's no need to overpay this year because the playoffs are. It would be great if Florida State could get to the playoff next year, but it's unlikely to happen. I think LSU is in the mindset that they think they can get to the playoff next year, so they're going to overpay for everybody they can. And again, I'm not saying it's the money is the reason Pat Payton left. He's flirted with leaving multiple times from Florida State, and for him to end up at LSU, best wishes to him. I hope he balls out and ends up, a day 1 or day 2 draft pick, but I don't think it makes any difference in Florida State's 2025 season.
Yeah, what's interesting is they also took that defensive end from Florida, Jack Pyburn. It'd be interesting to see, like who starts there, what does either start, do both start, what ends up happening. The last one I have on this, and most of this was about Jackson, but Marvin Jones Jr. I haven't seen any news on visits for him
Wow.
anywhere else. I haven't seen any news on teams to watch out for him. You know, like Pete Nakos of On Three does a great job of like, hey, these are the teams I'm hearing about, and usually those end up being the teams that guys end up landing at or visiting or whatever. I haven't seen any news there. Again, I don't know what ends up happening there, where he ends up going, but we're 2 weeks into the portal now. The portal's only open for another week. Obviously, you can land anywhere you want, kind of whenever. But yeah, I think Marvin Jones Jr. is an interesting one that we haven't seen a lot about.
Yeah, and, I didn't think he played poorly this year. I thought he was solid, but he wasn't the guy that you thought when you get a guy who was a 5-star out of high school. He was a backup out of Georgia for a reason, and I think we saw that reason this year. And John Papuch just being moved from defensive ends to linebackers, I think that move was interesting. I think you should have just parted ways with him. Quite frankly, that's just my opinion. Uh, and I think he's just looking for an opportunity for one last season. His goal is likely to be in the NFL after the season, and that's what he's going for. And he felt it was not going to happen at Florida State, which is fine. I have no problem with that as well. The portal is what it is, and I think he's going to end up somewhere, probably a Power Five school, but probably not, uh, a national title contender.
I'm seeing he signed with FIU. I haven't seen that anywhere, unless I'm just completely missing that. Um, Somebody just said it in the chat.
He's
So
from Miami, so that would make sense. But
yeah, On Three doesn't have that. Like, doesn't no, neither does 247 have him landing anywhere. I'm not saying that's not the case, but I'm not seeing that. And so if that has happened and you want to link me, great. But I haven't seen that.
damn,
So yeah, Boots went to FIU. Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, Lamont Green Jr. did go to FIU. I think that might be the confusion there. But yeah, I don't think Marvin Jones Jr. has landed anywhere just yet.